Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my next interview is with Gabe, Polsky, and Warshaw. We talked about their new film, Red Penguins. You're going to want to see this. It's a film that's fun. It's political. It's kind of maddening. It's about the Cold War. It's about communism run amok. It's about cross-cultural awareness and cross-cultural effectiveness. It's about vodka, surprisingly enough, and hopefully we got a smile out of Gabe and Stephen there. You're gonna have a great time listening in on some of the details, some of the idiosyncratic like nature of putting this film together and getting it up on the screen. Red Penguins is a blast. It really is, and it's like any great film. It goes deep and it's layered, and there's so much more going on than actually meets the eye. We talk about nationalism and optimism and hope. This is about the future. It's about democracy. It's about culture clashes and partnerships and trust. I mean, wow, right? There's a lot going on here. So listen in. You're going to have fun with the interview for sure, and way more fun with the movie Red Penguins. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing. You can buy a copy of my book, Real Change is Incremental, there, and find out more about my speaking and so on. And also, face-to-facelive.ca. We are growing, and we've got a great social media following. You can advertise with us. You can support us on Patreon. If you can't do that, you can always leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify or one of those usual digital suspects. They're out there, and we would really appreciate that. Sign up for the newsletter and share it with your friends. And don't forget, too, rabble.ca. I also am on that platform as well. News for the rest of us. You'll find writers and bloggers and podcasters and people talking about things that matter. Coming right up, Gabe Polsky, Stephen Warshaw, and Red Penguins at the Toronto International Film Festival. So welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by a couple very special guests here with me today. I've got Gabe Polsky and Stephen Warshaw. That's with a V, by the way, not a PH, and he's going to make it crystal clear as we get deeper into this interview. We're at the Toronto International Film Festival. We're here to talk about a film called Red Penguins. Guys, thanks for your time today. We're sitting around this big boardroom table at the National Film Board. How cool is that?
Well, we're just happy to be here. We're happy to be together.
Or as the Russians say, Zayabis. You can look that one up.
Oh yeah, I'm going to have to. Do you want to give us a little bit of an idea of what?
It's the Russian equivalent of fucking A. Fucking great.
There you go. So right out of the gate, we're right into it. First of all, I just want to say, guys, congratulations on the film. It is so much fun. It's great music. I laughed out loud many times, but also deeply political and has a real. I don't even know if I can say underlying tone, because it's kind of in your face in many respects. Tell me a little bit about where Red Penguins begins, Gabe, and I'm imagining Stephen's going to interrupt whenever he feels led.
Yeah, so I was promoting this film called Red Army, which was at the time in the New York Film Festival. It's a story kind of the rise and fall of the Soviet Union, told through the great kind of hockey dynasty of the Red Army team. And so when I was promoting it, after one of the screenings, this crazy guy came up to me after the screening, and it's Steve, and he's here, and he said, I love the movie, but I've got a crazy story, even more wild than this. Even it's about this Red Army team in the 90s, and right away I was like, it was the last thing I wanted to hear. I just sort of made this this big movie. Obviously documentaries take a lot of time, and sort of the idea of going back into Russia and sort of specifically, anything hockey related was the last thing I wanted to do.
Not high on your list.
No. And so I kind of said, man, you're crazy. Like, why would you ever come up to me after screening this and say you've got a better story? And so anyways, I did give him my address. He asked for it. And after a number of months, I received, a huge box of material. Basically, it's documentation, videos, pictures, correspondence, basically, about this whole story that happened in the 90s after the Soviet Union collapsed. The country was kind of in shambles, and this Red Army team was bankrupt, and the country was in really bad shape. And essentially, this team that was owned by the military and was the national pride of Russia had to go to its enemies, basically the United States, and to save them. And they found kind of a willing participant in the Pittsburgh Penguins. The owner, Howard Baldwin, was sort of this eccentric guy that sort of got involved in a lot of different strange things, and he thought it would be a great idea to invest in this team, the Red Army team. He thought that there was value. He thought that they could get kind of an early look at the younger players coming out of Russia, because at the time the all the great Russian players had already been taken by the NHL, and basically they were playing there. And so that's how.
So it was really seen as a way to make bags of cash. I mean, I think, what was the line? Fill the building and make us some money, I believe, is the direct quote, Stephen. And I've heard the word eccentric now, strange and crazy. I'm not sure they were all in relation to you, but
That's good.
Yeah. So as you stepped into this, how crazy did you think it was actually going to get? Some, 35, 40 years ago when
26 years ago. And in retrospect, to bring it into the modern phase, it seems as crazy as Trump trying to buy Greenland.
Right.
Us trying to buy a piece of the Red Army team. Sure. It was really viewed by the Russians as, blasphemy. How dare the Russians, the Americans, step in and try to run the greatest team that we've ever had. So
Cold War still hanging around in many respects. In fact, we could even probably have a pretty relevant conversation about the latent effects of the Cold War today. Never mind when you stepped into this story. Yeah, no, it's all the humor is gallows humor throughout the film. I mean, we were being followed by the mafia all the time. We were being watched, and I guess the only insurance policy that we got that we're not going to be killed came from one of the top mobsters, a Georgian mobster named Anzuri. He ran a mafia group, the Krishas, they're called the Roofs, where they put a roof over your head to protect you. That's the mafia is called Krisha in Russia. And I think that he sort of rested a lot of our fears. He came up to me at the Kremlin at the tennis party and said, I just wanted to let you realize how funny that is, right?
It is funny.
He came up to me at the Kremlin and at the tennis party.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny.
Kremlin Open, yes.
Yeah.
And he said, I just want to let you know that you're safe in my country. And I said, why? And he said, because you're taking care of the young kids, the junior programs. You're bringing beautiful new jerseys, equipment, sticks, everything for them. So that was basically our insurance policy. That
so there was this sense
killed.
of pride, this sense of this is a national. It was kind of a form of nationalism in a way, right? It wasn't just about taking care of the young people. There was more probably going on than meets the eye there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand that we really were persona non grata coming in for the diehard, the Soviets. They really wanted no part of us, and Gushin plays that role very well as the Stati Communist, the old communist. Tikhonov, they looked at us askance, that we were crazy and we had no business being there. And in retrospect, that was the hardest part, was to try to win the hearts and minds of the real hockey people in Russia, which we never did.
It's the kind of film when you get to the end and you sort of say, if 20% of this one is true, we're screwed.
Right.
Or we were at the time.
Yeah, well, I just remember that we had our first press conference, and we were trying to put a spin on the fact that the NHL had taken all of the best players, but that we had the best young players and that we were going to develop. And I referred to them as we have the young acorns to make the oak trees, like Mogilny, Bure, Fedorov, Krutov, Larionov, Makarov, and I remember one of the journalists stood up and said, well, fuck your acorns, we want our oak trees back. And that was really the beginning when we started to understand that we were viewed as, as a lumber company coming to clear cut a forest somewhere.
Very transactional and clearly the enemy. I mean, near the end of the film, Gabe, I'm assuming it seems to me most decisions by, we could talk about authorial intention, I suppose, but most decisions that a director makes and an editor makes are very much about story. But the phrase comes out that America destroyed Russia. Is that connected sort of? Is that a theme sort of throughout for you? Is that more of almost like a global kind of a statement? If we can go all political rather quickly, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase in the movie was that he was saying that the Americans destroyed the Soviet Union, and I think that yes, that there is sort of still this feeling that we're just basically competitors with them and trying to do everything we can to keep them down.
Right.
That a lot of people think that way there. But, I do want to point out that in the 90s, early 90s, it was one of the only times in recent times where there was this sense of optimism and hope for the relationship between America and Russia. There was actually, I think everyone was really kind of excited and happy after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and sense of relief and what's going to happen. And that's why there was so much investment going into Russia in the early 90s. I mean, everyone was going there, all the big companies, advertisers, trying to see what they could do and build relationships. And, it wasn't just right away antagonistic force.
Right.
I think those came in as soon as they realized that, wow, like Americans are coming in and having success and kind of basically exploiting our resources and trying to make money. But what about us? Is
this a film about capitalism run amok?
Definitely. That's one of the plots. I mean, if you look at it, it wasn't just Americans. It was really multinationals. Everyone trying to cash in on this new economy. 150 million people. Yeah.
Gabe, with optimism comes entrepreneurial spirit, right? Or at least maybe small e, maybe not capital E, but small e for sure.
Yeah, and the problem was that the building was empty. The team had no money. So imagine if the New York Yankees or the Toronto Blue Jays all of a sudden just said we're out of business.
Right.
What would that do to the fan base? What would that do to the heart and soul of these communities? And basically, we came in trying to help them and save this great dynasty, this legendary franchise. So with that comes a little bit of schadenfreude. I mean, if you think about it, they were actually rooting against us. It was weird. Our partners wanted us to fail because they didn't want the Americans to come in there and save them. They'd almost rather fail on their own than have Americans save them. So it's this weird environment.
But the public
loved it.
Yeah, they loved it and they wanted it to.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we were a hit. Obviously, the fans loved it. There were scalpers in front of all the games, and everything was sold out. The games were on Channel 1, which is the biggest television network in the world. It reaches Israel.
Also very funny, by the way, Channel 1.
Yeah, Channel 1, the government channel, Ostenkino television. And I remember that they were in the Middle East, they were in Asia, they were everywhere. And I remember that our games were only interrupted by Yeltsin during the Chechen War.
Wow.
That's how popular it became.
Well, and how important it is, right? I mean,
Right.
there is this sense of nationalism, it seems to me. With any great film, any great doc, any great story, there's so many layers. Gabe, what do you see on repeated viewings? What's coming out of the film for you, or Stephen, that you didn't or weren't really aware of going in?
Yeah, I mean, I really tried to focus on, the sort of cultural peculiarities and differences between, U.S. and Russia and kind of behaviors and psychology. Because, we read about Russia in the news every day. That's sort of all these facts and, allegations and so on. But you don't really kind of understand, the people and sort of the behaviors, why, the motivations, and so I really tried to kind of get new things, behaviors that maybe people will illuminate, their culture and sort of how we interact, how we behave with each other, and why there's this sort of difference, and so I think people will be surprised by that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for me, there's a cross-cultural effectiveness or lack thereof so apparent. I mean, isn't it when you go into business with somebody or you start building a relationship, especially coming off the tail of something like the Cold War? I mean, don't you have to listen?
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of listening going on.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of people actually going there and sort of talking
to actually understand the context.
Yeah, what's happening there and all the things that happen in context in the story and historically, all those little on the ground, what was happening and the revolutions going on a daily basis. The fact that, economically, country was in a free fall. It went from being everything state-owned to basically trying to privatize everything, and how quickly the country was changing and how difficult it must have been for people to adjust so quickly, I mean, think about if our country went from capitalism to communism overnight, and sort of what kind of adjustments people would have.
I remember a few years back, some of the work I do is in international development as a consultant. I worked in, I won't name the country, and it was post-communist country, and all of the sewer grates were missing. So in the middle of the night, no lights on the street. I mean, there would be, just because the metal, the steel was a commodity, and people were stealing windows from factories and ball bearing factories. And so you'd drive through the desert and you'd see these shells of buildings off in the distance. And I just sort of, as you were talking about that, it just, how kind of, crazy is not the right word. Maybe complicated's better, or difficult. Like I think it was you, Stephen, at one point that said there just weren't any laws.
Yeah.
No laws, no law enforcement. So, I mean, first of all, there was no money to pay for law enforcement. Right. So what are these guys going to do? How do you keep order? How does a society? I don't even know.
It's easy to play the corruption card, right? But when you're in the middle of it, it seems to me like it's a different story.
Yeah, I think, but culturally, I think what you've captured in the film beautifully is that it was a culture clash, between our societies, and if you know anything about Russian history, you know that the image of America on television and in their media was always that if you look at America, it's just everyone's drunk and killing each other. That's basically what was on television. And the kids were raised as young pioneers to salute the Soviet state, and then America was evil. So it was really, for us, it was really difficult culturally. I studied cultural anthropology in college, so it actually helped me immensely.
As a marketer, or just as a human being?
Yeah,
or
no,
both?
we had to be very sensitive to what they were interested in. I mean, I remember one thing, it's not even in history what you do, it's what you don't do.
Right.
And I remember my partner, Victor Gusev, who was in the film and plays a major role in our success. There was a time in America where it was very popular to go to a sporting event, and you'd see, it was called Dash for Cash. And you'd see they would litter the ice rink with 20s, 10s, 5s, and they'd give contestants out of the stands 3 minutes to collect as much money as they could. And I said, that would be funny. We should do that here since everyone's poor. And Victor Gusev said, don't, because the last thing you want to see is the image of Russians crawling on their knees for the American dollar.
Right.
So we learned what not to do also. It wasn't just all the glitter and glamour and fireworks and strippers and free beer.
Did you have a well-articulated strategy?
We did. No, we definitely did. I mean, we didn't go in there.
Can I see that PowerPoint, Stephen?
I have a book this thick, yes. Actually, I'll share that document with
you. That's right.
It's so old, it's not even on a computer. I got to scan that in.
Did the Bears... walking the Bears around the ice, was that a part of the strategy? I just
no,
love
that actually, I'll tell you, that was a spur of the moment decision. They brought in these animals for some sort of circus act.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I met the trainer. It was this dynamic young woman, and we started talking about all the weird things that the Bears could do. And I knew I had to appease my beer sponsor, which was looking for something interesting. And so I said, can the Bears serve beer and drink it?
Yeah, so did this really happen, or did you guys just stage this whole thing? Like, it's just, right? It's like, when's the actual fictional
like the moon
film
landing.
come out,
yeah,
right?
the moon landing.
Yeah,
it was all fake.
Happen.
Yeah, this never happened.
Red
right?
penguins, they didn't exist.
Never happened.
But the funny thing is
Fake news.
that this is an pretty much unknown
sure.
story, That's what's going to be really fun sharing with people, because it is so crazy and dynamic that I think people say, how did I not know about this? You know,
How much fun did you have in the editing room?
I had a lot of fun.
And with the music, the music?
When people ask that question, sometimes I don't know how to answer it, because, I think with documentaries, I don't know what other directors experience, but it's difficult,
Sure,
really
yeah.
difficult. But yeah, I mean, because it was so much craziness and there is a lot of stuff to chew on, it's not just one crazy thing after another, although it is, but it actually says something, and about, the cultures and what am I actually trying to say. That was fun to kind of try and weave and bob and weave and, through historical events as well.
Yeah.
And, there's just, a lot going on, but being able to do it in a way that people can actually digest it.
What's so interesting and amazing about this, and again, I'm going to say congrats on the film, and I hope everybody gets to see it, but is it's so much fun. You get to see the lessons in cross-cultural effectiveness and some really serious stuff going on here. We can talk about nationalism and politics, and yet we've got strippers in the basement, right? I mean,
Right.
There's this really, it's just bizarre. I mean, it's capitalism run amok, I think. Who was it that said this was just a big science experiment in a petri dish? Was that
Steve.
So-
there you go. Sounds like something
Yeah,
you'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Imagine West Side Story. This was East Side Story.
Right.
I think Gabe has captured the Sharks versus Jets mentality. We had a love affair. I mean, we really did. We all fell in love with the Russian culture. The people in Russia were very warm and open to change. It was just the government and the official, the officials that were running the show, because the general population really, really loved what we were doing. We were actually taking them out of their doldrums and their awful existence, and for 3 hours a night, they could just go have fun. And that's really what we tried to do, was to create this environment to escape the madness that they were in. And to take Gabe's point, it was a foreign language, capitalism. No one spoke the language of business, and those that did made a fortune.
Well, isn't there a lesson here too? Just the whole idea of exporting democracy, like this idea that it's going that what works here is going to work everywhere else. And I mean, isn't that it seems like something we think is true?
We were apolitical in our hockey, though. I mean, our perception is another story, but we did not play the political cards,
right.
And that was not our goal. We were not there to proselytize or to turn.
Right.
I mean, we were there to just give the fans their money's worth.
Maybe it's about the exportation of capitalism, that it's going to work in every other culture, that it's going to work in Mongolia, that it's going to work well in Burkina Faso, that it's going to work well in Cambodia, and so on. That maybe it's about, and maybe that's another, for me, I think it was certainly another message of the film. What about trust? I mean, how did you trust anyone? I mean, trust comes up a couple of times. We had partners we didn't trust, right? I mean, isn't that, fundamental to any relationship, to building a business?
Yeah, we talk about it. This is very much like a love affair that we had that went bad, where you put all your blood, sweat, and tears, your trust into your lover, and then you find out that they've been cheating on you.
The moment that you capture about the I believe it's the Nike logo being basically chiseled out of the ice and replaced, and the reason was because it's our team, I think. Actually shooting themselves in the foot from an economic sort of perspective. It just shows you kind of the madness of it all.
The pride and the ego, and after the Americans were having a lot of success, and I think they just got a little bit upset and wanted to show that, look, this isn't your team, and so that's when the problem started to
Russia is based on power. I mean, that's Putin. He's a monarch. He's there. So they respond to power. Russia. They've always, whether it's the Bolsheviks, the communists, the KGB, Putin, power rules that country. So the act of ripping out the Nike logo on the eve of when all the multinational executives were coming in just to watch this one game was their statement of saying, hey, basically, this is our country. We'll do what we want to do here, even if they're hurting themselves. I mean, that was the craziest part. Almost like a little kid that, you don't touch that stove, don't touch,
Right.
and then they touch the stove and they burn themselves, and and they don't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear, we told you not to touch the stove.
I think it was one of the Western investors who said, I can't remember, Howard maybe, something about when people invest serious money, interesting parts of their characters come out. And that sure comes out in the film. We're probably going to wrap it up here in a couple minutes. What about can you talk a little bit about the prophetic edge of this? I mean, this is about greed. It's about fear. It's about control. Any other sort of immediate things, thematic things that come to mind? If I was to pull up BBC's homepage today, how many correlations could we make there, Gabe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think. Steve, you can help me out here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, to me, it was the ultimate culture clash. And, I don't know if someone recently asked me, was there a hero in this film? And I said no, because if there was a hero, they would have saved the joint venture. And, long before the Yankees had their joint venture with Manchester United and the Red Sox with Liverpool, we were the young pioneers. We were the Lewis and Clark, and unfortunately, we were a little too early. And, I just think that at that time...
Ahead of your time.
Yeah, there was just too much animosity towards America that we, in fact, were blamed for the dissolution of the
Could this
Soviet
work
Union.
today as a business deal? Look at the smile.
I don't think so,
Yeah. Just with all that's going on in the world, we're back to trust. We're back to relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And just the way, I mean, if you look Russia now, there's just not a lot of American activity there. I think most people have left, and I think a lot of it's just domestic there for similar reasons, that I think once someone gets kind of too powerful, successful, it becomes impossible to continue,
I think the most important question, though, is everybody really drunk in Russia?
That is the most important question. I think.
I
should have. Look, but back then, the
glasses.
mortality rate was like epically low.
Sure.
What was it? 50s? Yeah, it was
50s.
insane there. And I think now it's a lot higher. So I think, they still are drunk, but not. But so are as Americans too. I mean, we're all
Absolutely.
we drink.
It's also a metaphor for something, and
Yeah.
I apologize
Yeah.
for not bringing some great chilled
I
Grey
know.
Goose and a couple
I'm going to
of shot
try and bring
glasses.
some to the premiere.
Yeah, you
tonight,
should. You so should.
By the way, the Russian vodka is as strong and brutal as their leaders, too. I mean, Russian vodka is very strong, not easy to drink.
Thanks so much, guys. I mean, I feel like we're just getting started. We've been talking to Stephen Warshaw and Gabe Polsky about their new brilliant, fun, political, and maddening film, Red Penguins. Thanks, guys, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dick.